Hi, we're live. Back. Hi, nice to have you back with Podcasters Unleashed. Today we've got a very interesting subject for you. But before we get into that, I'm your host for this week, Simon Rushton. And then we're starting from my left on the screen. We have Carla.
I'm the host of the Wonder and Wellbeing podcast, which is a podcast all about education and wellbeing and all the things that intersect those two topics.
Victor.
Hi, I'm Victor Osio. I'm the host of the Diaspora Entrepreneurs podcast. You can find me on Spotify and all other platforms.
Matilda.
Hello, everyone. I'm Matilda, host of Coffee with Matilda, Journey to Self. And I'm here.
And Nelson.
Hi, I'm Nelson J. Zambrano. I'm the host of Investing in America. You can find out about how to invest in the U.S. and incredible stories from entrepreneurs and their best business practices. Have an episode come out every Wednesday. Thank you.
Carla.
Thanks, Simon. So I'm the host of the podcast Women with Stories, where I share real stories from real women, expat women especially, who lives in Paris. So tune in for new episodes. Over to you, Simon.
And I'm Simon with my two podcasts. One's Taxi Chronicles, where we hear real riders with real stories, sharing their most deepest secrets, which always knocks me for six. Daily we post, and the other one is Africa Investor Stories, where you hear the best ways and true real stories from real investors about what it's like to invest in Africa from various different places in the world. But moving on, so just our quick disclaimer, Podcasters Unleashed are not experts. We're a group of podcasters sharing experiences and discussing ideas. If you're struggling with any issues related to the topics covered in any of our episodes, please reach out to a skilled professional. That is not us. You can also check out our individual podcasts for commentary resources that may be useful. We're moving along. On a personal note, as the host today, I have chosen to speak about the death penalty. But based on the 54 different countries I've visited around the world, it occurred to me that one law does not work for all tribes, nations, or international communities. Today we can discuss some of these points. Starting with, capital punishment is a crime which is punishable by death and comes from the Latin word kabud, which means head, literally losing a head. As of 2020, there's a total of 53 countries still have the death penalty, employing a variety of methods, including hanging, shooting, lethal injection, electrocution, and beheading. So be careful when you're on holiday. They want to upset the locals. Anyway, so we go over to Nelson, and Nelson's going to tell us about China, give us a brief introduction about China's policy and on death penalty. So Nelson, over to you.
Simon, thank you very much. Okay, a couple of facts on China. And by China, I mean PRC, People's Republic of China, not Taiwan. So the death penalty in China, just a couple of bullet points, a couple of facts. It's presently used now, in a way, by the People's Republic, the Communist Party, to assert power. They use it as a way to remove corruption. They want to make an example. They're trying to bring accountability, punishment. It's also a way for the Prime Minister to remove his rivals as well. It demonstrates to the people that no one is above the law. They have actually executed billionaires. 2 billionaires were actually executed in China, and even high-ranking people as a way to assert the will of the people. And the majority of the population, it has the widespread support of the Chinese populace. The crimes, it's murder, drug trafficking, and corruption. And Simon, I could give a couple of more real quick ones on that, but that is basically the country that has the most executions in Asia is China. However, per capita, because they have such a huge population, it's actually relatively small, but they are high profile executions. So there you go, Simon.
Carla, Carla's going to tell us about Buddhism right now.
All right, so Buddhism is quite old. It's like 2,000 or more years old, 2,500 years old, and there are more than 400 million followers of Buddhism worldwide, apparently. So it's grown and it's continuing to grow. Its history is in the East and Southeast Asian countries, but it's grown in influence in Western countries, and it's had some influence on the way that we look at the death penalty in the Western world. So basically, the approach to capital punishment in Buddhist countries is a combination of Buddhist principles, but also the principles of the legal system of that country. And because it's not in one form in any place, there's no unified policy on capital punishment in Buddhist countries. But again, like Nelson said, it's usually for serious crimes, including murder, when it's used in those countries. Now, Buddhism is known as the religion of peace, or the religion of non-violence. And we have quotes from the Buddha, such as, an action, even if it brings benefit to oneself, cannot be considered a good action if it causes physical or mental pain to another being. And so that in itself rules out the use of capital punishment from a Buddhist perspective. Another thing about the history of Buddhism is that it believes fundamentally in the cycle of rebirth and the principles of karma. And so where capital punishment is concerned, if you kill a person, even if that person has done something wrong, that is not going to put you in a good position in the future, or in, these cycles of birth and rebirth. And Buddhism has strong views on inhumane treatment of people, including offenders. And it goes on the principle that even if a person does wrong, they still have a right to be treated as their life being sacred, and that you are not able to overstep these boundaries of not showing compassion or mercy to them just because they've committed a crime. Some of the countries that practice it, one is Thailand, and Myanmar is another one. And in the case of countries like this, where they combine the principles of Buddhism with capital punishment, the reasons why they do that include that politicians believe that it's necessary for retribution or for deterring people from committing certain crimes, for maintaining order in the society, despite what Buddhism says. Or that they've got a long tradition of the use of capital punishment in that country, or that a lot of the population go in favor of it and see it as more important than the Buddha's teaching. So although they claim to be Buddhist, they still believe that capital punishment is important as a deterrent, and maybe to maintain things like political stability and order, as Nelson mentioned.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for that, Carla. Victor, over to you. Victor's going to be talking about the Islamic perspective.
Yeah, thank you very much, Simon. See, this is in Islamic world and Islamic culture. I think this is very serious, because 8 out of the top 10 countries that has serious executions last year were mostly Islamic countries, apart from China, which is the top, and the US. So, and capital punishment in Islam was traditionally regulated by the Sharia law, which is the religious law that is being practiced by the by Islamic people, and they get it's kind of a precept from the Quran or the Hadith. So, and it is not directly, the punishments are not really directly coming out from the Quran, but they are being interpreted by the scholars or by the judges in Quran and the judges in Sharia. So for cases like murder, like rape, drug trafficking, corruption, these are serious crimes under Sharia. So it's being used the same, like what Carla and Nelson just said, to wipe away mostly corruption, and also to see, according to an Islamic scholar, his name is he has a YouTube channel, Noman Ali Khan. So according to him, and I'll quote, he said the reason why there is capital punishment in Islam is to regulate and make sure that humanity is still intact with society, which is why the forms of punishment have evolved at times as time changes to adapt to the ways of living in this life, right, in these modern times right now. And in the modern era, Muslim majority countries, they've kind of like adopted codes, they adopted legal codes that are based on European models and deemed to be, what's it called, which is very controversial with inhumane treatment by, because, okay, let me just say this in context now. You see, what works in one country, what is a major crime punishable by death, beheading in one country, is not. Say sexual preference, for example, in the Western world, it's cool, but in a Sharia practicing country, it is not. So I will rephrase what you just said. Be careful where you go to for holiday, Simon.
Okay. So Matilda, over to you. Matilda's going to tell us about the English law.
Yes. Capital punishment in United Kingdom was used from ancient times until the second half of 20th century. Although unused, the death penalty remained a legally defined punishment for certain offenses, such as treason, until it was completely abolished in 1998. Sir Samuel, speaking to the House of Commons on capital punishment in 1810, declared that there is no country on the face of earth in which there have been so many different offences according to the law to be punished with the death in England, known as the Bloody Code. There were like 220 crime punishable by the death penalty. Even, for example, the funny one was being in the company of a gypsy for 1 month. You could have had death penalty. Even if a theft of goods for like 12 pence, you could have had death penalty. So it was scary at that time. Thank God it's abolished.
Okay. Howla's going to be telling us about Christianity.
Yeah, before going to Christianity, I feel like a lot of people, they use in religion to say that only God could judge. And for me, when I research, I don't know which religion they are referring to, because a lot of religion I'm aware of, they made that claim about the capital punishment. And in the Christianity, if you look way back in the chapter 9 of Genesis, it was written, "Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood to be shed." So capital punishment in Christianity is not a violation of human life, is an affirmation of it. And whoever takes it or kills someone has to pay the ultimate price. And of course, there is differences between the Old Testament and the new one. The Old Testament specifies 36 capital offenses, including crimes such as magic, idolatry, and murder. And many Christians oppose to this kind of capital punishment, and they want to change it. And in the New Testimony, if I'm not wrong, they are trying to reduce the capital punishment. But in most religions, they use capital punishment, as Victor said, to regulate the society and make sure also that humanity is still intact with society.
Okay, thank you, Howla. So what I'm going to tell you very briefly is about America. Capital punishment was brought to America by the British in the 17th century for crimes such as stealing, trading with Indians, or rejecting the idea of one God. Some of the punishments that you could endure were hanging, beating, breaking at the wheel. That's where they lay you across a wheelbarrow, like a horse and cart from the Western days, and they smash your bones. That was very interesting. And of course, not to forget burning at the stake. In 1777, the founding father, Thomas Jefferson, tried to make capital punishment solely for murder and treason, but failed. In 1790, the U.S. Bill of Amendments, the Eighth Amendment, stated that no cruel or unpunished punishment can be inflicted on any United States citizen. But as we pursue on, in the 1920s, research suggested criminals were a victim of their environment and their genetics. Many states stopped the punishment, but due to the World War, it was brought back using gas chamber, fire and scope, or lethal injection. Today, there's only 26 states in America that have the death penalty, and they all inflict lethal injection. But moving on. So we've got some questions here, and I just want to say before I go into the questions, these questions have been designed to provide us all a greater understanding of what a judge/government must take into consideration when creating and upholding the law. Keeping in mind, it's easier to make laws for smaller communities with the same beliefs and moral standards. Okay, so this question goes out to all of us, all of you, but I will start with Kyle, of course. It's the pros and cons of the death penalty as you see it, and why are you for or against? So Carla, if you start with that, please.
All right, so I'll start with the pros and cons. Well, it's pretty simple. I mean, the advantage of the death penalty is mainly it's around two areas. So first of all, it's the concept of retribution for the victims, or justice. It depends on how you want to look at it. And the second one is about the concept of a deterrent. So it's about stopping people from wanting to, I don't know, go to the depth of, the darker sides of their human nature and do horrific things without regard to the consequences of that, or on society, but also on the victims. In terms of the downsides of it, I think it's all about whether or not we can trust other human beings to make that judgment. And if we do, how can we make sure that they do it in a just way? And I think that was what the role of religion used to play. It was all about making sure that humans understood that there was an authority greater than them. So when they were making these decisions as to whether or not people should be punished and how they should be punished, they were doing that in the most balanced way possible. So, yeah.
Okay.
And agree or disagree? This is difficult. It's really difficult. I would say I agree with it. However, I disagree with the way that it's often done in the world and has been done historically, because of this issue of the imbalance in the minds and hearts often of the people whose job it is to do the justice and the decision making. They don't always do a good job. And that's where sometimes I'm like, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Okay.
So Victor, your thoughts, pros and cons, and to why you came to your decision so far?
Yeah, I said earlier, I'm kind of indifferent, because what works in one particular climate does not work in another one. So if you live in, say you live in England now, and you see someone being executed for a crime, or for an alleged crime like homosexuality or sexual preferences, or say religious. Hello.
Yeah, go on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, something like religious freedom, whereby we say anything about the deity that we worship, and you hear what is being done in the other side of the world. Say like in Islam now, you don't mention certain things because it will be slammed down as religious blasphemy. Whereas you are here practicing religious freedom, you can say whatever you want to say against any type of deity, and you see that as your right. But whereas when you see it on the other side of the world, you're like, come on, man, he just practiced, or she is just practicing what other people in different parts of the world are practicing. So I'm not really, in regards See, so there's so many things that I can pick and choose if I have the chance, or if I have the one that stick to just say, you know what, this is the gavel, let the word. I'm very indifferent about it. I won't go either way. I'm just on the sideline on this.
Okay then. Matilda, I believe you also had something to say, but you can answer the question at the same time.
Yes, I think the death penalty has no deterrent effect. No scientific study has ever proven that the death penalty has a more deterrent effect than other criminal penalties. So for me, that's the first argument that I'm going to do. And also, I think it's discriminatory because it's more for poor people and people for a certain social class. Sometimes you cannot afford a very expensive lawyer and you end up and then you might be dead because of it. So also, I think it's the death penalty denies the ability of every man to improve and become better. There is hope. Some people might change. So why we should take that away from people? And I don't think death penalty store any social stability, or more importantly, I don't think death penalty gives internal peace for the victims. So I'm against death penalty because I strongly believe death penalty violates the most fundamental human right, the right to life. So.
Sorry, Nelson, I missed you out. You was meant to be at the start, but go on, you can answer it now.
Okay. First of all, it's tough to come after my co-host here. What Matilda said, what Carla said. Matilda said it violates the most fundamental right, human life. So, regardless, the pros and the cons. Pros, it is a form of justice. It is how it's practiced in China. They're trying to practice it where there's not really much of an escape valve. You know, they'll execute a billionaire too as well. Cons, it is not equitable. There's preponderance of basically poor people on the lower end of the scale get hit with this type of justice. Wealthy people are going to be able to get away, to escape, or get a better deal, so to speak. So there. Am I against it? I'm 100% against it. Why? It's not really a deterrent. It's not set up to, someone says murder. Well, at what point do you put murder, right? Let's say it's a company that's polluting the water and the kids from the local school are drinking that water, right? Are we going to go, or are they going to go after the CEO and say, hey, you knew about this and, your head gets lopped off? No, right? So again, so I kind of have to look at it from there. Maybe I would be for it. Again, big maybe in crimes against humanity, like the Nuremberg trials, things like that. That would be something, right? They killed all these people inhumanely on top of that. So for me, it's for it to get to the point where that is an option. There's a lot of other deterrents before the crime gets to that level. So, and that is it for me, and I am complete.
Hala, your take on things?
Yeah, well, I agree with capital punishment, but I don't strongly agree with it because of the injustice that we see in the society. Society teach how bad an action is by the punishment it metes out, but sometimes there is a lot of exceptions to different people. But I just want to give you a context and be in a place of a victim. Imagine if someone killed a member of your family, or there's a terror action happened to your life, or someone you've been cared for, and you know that the guy who committed this kind of terrible acts are out there. Of course, killing a murder does not bring a loved one back, but it provides some sense of justice. It's a minimum of justice to ease the pain from the victims and what happened to them. And today, with all the scientific development, DNA testing and other forensic tools, it's impossible to be mistaken or to execute an innocent person. But I do believe that there has to be conditions, and there has to be a large amount of evidence in order to execute a person and not just execute someone. And I do believe there's a lot of injustice in the world today. But if you could just be in a place of a victim, or being someone who his family has killed, or being in a position of war, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about someone who killed your family?
Okay. Matilda, I see you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, but so are you saying if somebody killed a loved member of mine, if I know they're dead, I'll be happy? I don't think so.
But if they are out there without being charged
Not
with
out
anything,
there,
would you
not out
love?
there, but they are in prison. So by them dying is not going to make me happier.
So correct me if I'm wrong. What I believe we're hearing is that you're happy with the prison system in your country.
I would strongly want him to be life sentenced and pay his price of, I mean, if he's living, he's going to pay the price of the crime that he did. But if he's dead, he's not going to feel anything. So I want him to leave. I want him to live with that guilt. That's more of a punishment than him dying. Dying is 1 second, gone. But him every day waking up, knowing that the loved ones of these people are suffering is a different ballgame.
But keeping every murder alive cheapens humans' life. It's belittle murders, and everyone could do it. If we just let and say, well, keep everyone in prison, it's okay for 3 years, and they came out with a fine, that's justice? That's not justice.
Okay.
Life sentence.
Hi, Nelson. Nelson wants to say something.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess it has to look at what your value system is, right? Is it that, just keep it I mean, we're not talking about extremes here, that, okay, you kill someone, you're out in 5 years, you're out in 3 years, you pay a fine. Now, in some countries, that is the way it works. I can tell you right now, after a certain socioeconomic level, you could be killing people left and right. You're not going to get that kind of justice. I mean, it's just not going to happen. All right? It's just not going to happen. So it's more of a revenge, really. It's more kind of, I want revenge. And the question is does that make society better, right? Does it make society better to get that kind of revenge? Because I'll tell you this right now, they make plenty of mistakes, even with DNA. They make plenty. If your name is Muhammad Ahmed, something like that, you're going to get double scrutiny in the United States getting on a plane. All right? And there's a bunch of guys by the name of Muhammad. So what I'm getting to is it's not a fair system. And if there's an oops, we made a mistake with the DNA, that person's dead. Now we have 2 people we hope are innocent, but they're dead. Somebody made a mistake and someone else. So, again, a lot of things can happen before we go to the death penalty. It's almost like this gut thing. I want revenge. I want them to suffer. There's a lot of different ways to do it. One second. There's a lot of different ways it can happen. But what happens when we make a mistake?
Okay.
Because one second, I tell you, I'd hate to be the family that, you killed my loved one by mistake because somebody wanted revenge. Now, what are we going to go after?
Okay.
Right? And thank you.
Okay. next question is, because obviously we're going, the whole scope is broadening. I know you want to jump in on this, which is good. This is a question that when it was being posed, it actually brought up some interesting thoughts. It said, should poor countries have the death penalty as an alternative to expensive justice systems? So some places in the world, the country's not at a state where you can be putting people in jail for a long period of time, life, feeding them, healthcare, and all those kind of things. So it's all very well people sitting there in comfortable leather cushioned armchair point of view and saying, yes, well, just put them in jail forever. But many countries in the world don't have that privilege. So what is your take on that? And I will just throw that out generally. So just raise your hand and the question will go to you. So Carla.
Yeah, and I made a note of that because I was thinking that when Matilda was making a comment, I was thinking how much of a Western privileged view it is to say when a person commits a crime, they should go to a trial and then they should be put in prison for life. The reality of it is that the system that we see in the West, where people can have these life sentences in what are tantamount to hotels, some of the prisons that people go in the West they're like hotels compared to the standards in other countries. And the number of people that's in prisons in, for example, the United States and the United Kingdom is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And there's no deterrent for a lot of people for doing things like committing murder and rape. And we've just faced a case here in the UK where a police officer has been arrested and charged with taking a woman off the street and murdering her. And it's causing an outrage.
And raping her.
Yeah, well, I haven't read the details of the case, but here we have the privilege to say, okay, let's give him a long trial and we'll have lots of lawyers and we'll have publicity and we'll have the media and then we'll put him in prison and we'll have lots of debates and we'll write about it and analyze it and study it and we'll push for laws through Parliament because we're so privileged and we're so rich that we have time and resources to throw at that. But there are lots of places in the world where that does not exist. And the prison system is overwhelmed and does not have large amounts of funding. You have to remember that the UK government is incredibly rich, as are a lot of other governments worldwide. And us taxpayers, we fund the prison system here. And our taxes are higher as a result of the amount of criminals that we have in prison. And not to mention the police, I can get my council tax bill and it specifies how much I pay for the police, which is crazy. And other countries just don't have that funding. And then in the US, you have this privatized prison system, which has some real huge flaws in it. And I think that's when we are talking about whether or not we should have these different forms of justice or have the death penalty, we have to remember that lots of countries in the world do not have those prison systems as an option, or those long trials or juries and all of that kind of stuff that we have come to see as the basic standard of a justice system. And in those cases, what would you do is the question.
Matilda?
I was reading about this article and it was fascinating. Because in Iran, they hang the killers so people can go and watch it as well. And it was showing two mothers. One was the son that was killed and the other one was the killer's mother. They were both in that event, in that execution area. And at the end, seconds before executing him, the victim mother forgave the killer. And you had to see two mothers hugging each other and they start crying. And it was fascinating because I was crying and I didn't even know these people. And when they were asking him why you did that, she said, I just wanted to forgive him. I know what he did was very bad. And I knew that my son would have want me to forgive him. And she was continuing saying that, and it's a very interesting, if anyone wants to read it, she was saying at one point you just want to let it go because you feel free. You feel free with that pain. Otherwise, that pain, your son is gone and you already ordered someone to die as well. That pain is so killing that you cannot even breathe. But now that I forgave the killer, I'm breathing again.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very interesting.
Sorry, Matilda, that also depends on the nature of the crime. because even though it's murder, there may be a history between the two people, the killer and the thing. So, you know, what I've found in history, everything is slightly different. Moving on to the third question is, in certain regions of the world, regardless of the government laws, certain communities will execute you based on cultural and moral standards. Do you think this is acceptable? I'll give you a personal example. When I was living in a certain place in Africa, there was a known paedophile, and he had been caught with a child, and they put him in jail, but he bribed his way and he got released out, and then he did it again. And the third time, the local community went to the police station. They said, give us him or we will burn down the police station with you in it. So all the police did is took the man, pushed him outside and shut the door, and the local just executed him straight away. Now, this is a prime example of a situation where they're just not having it. And they have their own rules. Regardless of the government, they have their own rules. So what would you have to say to that, Nelson?
Yeah, so Simon, you said a key thing. He bribed his way out, okay?
Yeah.
So then now you have an accomplice, okay? You have accomplices, you have accessories. Should the individuals who helped him bribe his way out, who even gave him the money for the bribe, should they also be killed? Capital punishment, right? They were accessory to a murder. Is it just a trigger man who gets, the chair, so to speak?
Sexual abuse.
Right, but what I'm getting to is this. They were an accessory to a heinous crime. They were an accessory to pedophilia. I mean, who should be, in the US, you have this saying, they should get the chair, right? The elected chair. Should it just be the pedophile or the accomplices? The person that got the kid, the person that said, hey, look, you give me some money, I'm gonna let you out, knowing that person's a known pedophile. So isn't it better? Right. So one second. So I'm getting to, isn't it better if we set up a system, okay, where punishes that, and then on top of that, we remove the problem at the base. That last person in the chain, that's the last person in a chain. That's it.
Okay. Victor, you wanted to say something? Your sound, please, Victor. Victor?
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yep.
Nelson, it's kind of okay for you to say that, but given the context of this particular question, there are some communities who just take things as is. So in the case of pedophilia, in the case of sexual preferences, in some communities in Nigeria, they take matters into their own hands. Child trafficking, they take matters into their own hands straight away. They don't wait for the government to do. Even the police need to come and rescue you from the mob. So that is you don't wait for those try to like understand the chains of where. No, you don't. The police will come and rescue you.
Yeah, but remember that situation that Simon said, he was in jail, right? He was in jail. Then he bribed his way out. I mean, is it just a pedophile that gets punished, or do you get the accomplices too? Do you get the enablers? I mean, the people who say we're going to take it into our own hands. What about the one who let out the pedophile? What about, does that person get any accountability?
Moving on to the next question is, what sentence, sorry.
No, what I was going to say is, should that person also receive capital punishment?
No,
we're talking about a corrupted system.
Right.
It's a corrupted system.
Thank you very much, Hala. Correction.
Yeah, the next question is, how long should it take before someone is executed? Considering countries like America have the death penalty, and you could be 14, 20 years before you get executed. Go on, Nelson.
Yeah, again, I mean, a wealthy person can let it linger, let it, filibuster its way all the way through. A poor person was not going to have that many options. Just, who was it, Matilda or someone was saying, they just can't afford a good legal team. So, I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Do you think there should be a set period of time? So after 10 years, regardless of what's happened, you get the shot.
No, because then after set time, right? Like in China, they have they call it death penalty reprieve, or so they're on like an extended death row. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, people can falsify evidence. People can find evidence. You see, there's all these other ways of being able to work the system. There's all these other ways to be able to work the system, and that's what it comes down to.
Okay. What should be the minimum age for execution, and does gender matter?
You give me this one. You guys always give me the one about kids.
What is this kind of question?
Carla, go on.
All right, you give me the ones about kids, so I'll jump in on this one. Right, now this is really interesting. I did a little bit of research about the youngest age of children getting the death penalty, and the prize goes to, guess who? The USA. But in the modern times, it goes to the United States. Executed apparently an innocent boy. I won't mention his name, but if you're interested and you're listening in, go out there and do some research. 14-year-old. Apparently, he was innocent. And I think that this is probably in support of what Matilda was saying, and maybe some points that Nelson mentioned as well about some of the flaws and the number of innocent people. And I touched on this a bit at the beginning as well, about how even if you're in favor of the death penalty, you still got to answer this question of who makes the decision. And I guess they would have to answer questions like, what age would it be? And traditionally, it would have been determined by things like the age of criminal responsibility. And that is quite subjective, but it's determined by child development theories or psychology theories, which determine around the age of 9 or 10, children will develop the ability to know right from wrong, even if they've been brought up. We often hear this justification of children who have gone through extreme trauma, or they've been sexually abused or physically abused, who don't develop this proper behavior of right and wrong. And so therefore it's used as an excuse. But lots of researchers, I use that term lightly, it's not my words, but this is what's often said, researchers and psychologists have said, despite that abuse and suffering, people still do know the difference between right and wrong. And there's an innate conscience within all of us that tells us around the age of 9 or 10 what we should and shouldn't do. And that's how they determine the age. And in relation to gender, no, there is no evidence to suggest that there's a difference between the age of criminal responsibility in children based on gender. But there are some countries that define differences and have much stricter rules for girls than they do for boys. And I'll leave it there.
Nelson, can you just read the comments, please?
Okay, and I'm having a little bit of a challenge here. Muriaga Achinke, sensitive topic. And then previously we have James Finney. Why aren't death row people in the States organ framed, to organ donation, to give their others a chance of extended life? And would a sick person want those organs? Well, I guess they're making the assumption that that person who was killed is guilty. And it also, the person who is being executed, it's their organs. So, but there you go, Simon, back to you.
Okay. This question you touched on already, but I just want to stress it again. Is life in jail a true punishment, and does it really help society and the victim? Okay, no, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to, how does society look at? Is it to punish or is it to rehabilitate, right? Is it to punish the person or is it to rehabilitate, or both?
Okay.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. If it's a vindictive society, then it's to punish and, torture and, get your rocks off that way. If it's to rehabilitate, that's a whole different story.
Okay. Matilda?
I think the only one point that I can maybe go pro is, I think society must defend itself against those who threaten it to survive. A society must defend against disorder and enforce laws. So depends. I mean, I think this is a very deep question. Before we go with the death row, we have to ask question: do we give the society that we're living, do we give our people the right that we're giving to everyone? Do we have a good education system? Do we give the right welfare? If not, then okay, if you're killing people left and right for death penalty, what are we teaching? But let's go deeper than that. Are we giving a good education to our children? Are we teaching them morality? If we're not teaching them morality, killing the people and saying, "Oh, it's a good example for others," then it's not gonna solve the problem here. We're gonna have a gazillion people dying for death penalty. But no, we have to teach them morals, values, principles. And when we do have that in our education system, in our families, in our society, then death penalty wouldn't even be an important topic, because people will have the morals to follow it instinctively. That's my argument.
Before I ask this question,
Matilda, Simon, can I just say something?
Sorry. Well, bear with me 1 second, please. The time's not a thing that we've got a luxury right now. Before I ask this question, can you just raise your hand if anybody's had a family member killed? So okay. So what crimes should people be executed for? Victor?
Child trafficking.
Child
rape,
trafficking? Yeah.
Rape, pedophilia, murder. Yeah, those are top of that. These are the reasons why I'm tending to move towards supporting death penalty. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Matilda?
But Victor, I mean, maybe the person have a psychological problem. So what, they have to kill him because he has a psychological problem? Maybe if we have a different educational system, maybe the mom was doing a lot of wrong thing to that child, and that child became a murderer. We have to understand where the root of these problems are. Just giving people not the chance to heal themselves or to understand what's happening in the families, then we're gonna have a problem.
What? Okay. Sorry. Howler was gonna come out with a question earlier.
I just want to add something. Hold on, Nelson. Just want to add this idea, and then you can go with your what you want to say, because you brought about Victor talked about the capital punishment in Arabic countries, and a lot of Muslim scholars or Arabic countries, they do capital punishment, but they don't understand, and they don't have this enough conditions to dictate this capital punishment. So there are 3 questions to answer that. What the text really say, what other conditions in order to implement this capital punishment, and in which society and in which context. As long as we don't have these 3 answers to these questions, we are playing injustice against poor people and minorities, and the rich people, of course, they don't have any capital punishment. So they are implementing this as a way to show that they are Islamic, and it's not, because in Islam it's if you want to apply Islam, it's by having justice and education, and not with punishment to show that society is Islamic enough, which is not true.
Okay. Carla?
Hey,
Yeah,
one second. Can I just read out a comment here?
Yeah, okay, yeah, sorry.
Okay, comment from James Finney. Rehabilitation must be the way forward. Otherwise, you are saying that a person can never change. When a person becomes responsible for their actions, the payback to society can be huge. From those who have realized their crimes. From James Finney. Thank you, James.
So
It kind of connects in a little bit to the point I was going to make about this thing about can everybody be rehabilitated, and how do we define a comment that Matilda made about psychological problems. She asked the question of what if the person has psychological problems, and I was just thinking about the prevalence of what we call psychological problems now, and how a psychological problem is determined is by assessment by trained psychologists, and they use a thing called the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And what's interesting about that is the number of psychological disorders or diagnoses that you can have for having a mental problem has increased significantly over the years. So when they first made this book in 1952, there were 102 things that a person could use as an excuse for certain behaviors in terms of so everyday problems with their behavior and socialization, right up to, extreme problems that might cause a person to rape or murder or be a pedophile. In the 2000 edition of that book, there were 365 diagnoses. So it had gone from 102 in 1952 to 365 in 2000. And it's going up all the time. They're coming up with new disorders and new things that a person can claim they are suffering from to justify these extreme behaviors and actions in society. So that also calls into question things like using psychological disorders as a reason for why people do these things, and it creates some problems in the justice system.
All right, closing up is this. I'll give my main personal. Sorry, run out of time. My main personal issue is paedophilia. As a person with many children, my main thing, not even so much murder, because people do things which I could argue, in my eyes, you had it coming. But on paedophilia, I don't see how anybody can say that there's a reason to keep them stored away in a hotel like prison. So I would be interested to know, is anybody here on the assumption that paedophilia is a crime that is not worth the death penalty? Matilda? Oh God, Nelson, God. So you don't think paedophilia is worth the death penalty?
Well, it's not that it's not worth the death penalty. It's just that for pedophilia to happen, okay, and we're talking about child trafficking, human trafficking, there is a whole network set up to make that happen. You see what I mean? So if there's a network set up to make it happen, attack the network. Okay, go after the network. And then the people that have those problems, rehabilitate them, keep them in jail. But it's like you have this whole organized crime operation taking place, and it's the pedophile. No, I mean, look at that organized crime organization. They've kidnapped somebody's kid. Look at the pain that family has. What justice is that family? Their child has been kidnapped. They don't know where their kid's at. Their kid's going to be transported across a border, maybe somewhere else. You see what I mean? You've got all these other people that are kind of getting off, and then that one guy at the end, because he's the bad guy. You have a whole chain. Go after the entire chain. Put the chain in jail.
No execution, though.
No, you know what? Okay, pedophilia, the guy, like here in the U.S. where I live, if a child molester moves within an X distance, like of a school, they have to put his face, they come by, I don't know, some organization and puts his face up, close by. So that person, their life is kind of screwed no matter how you slice it. Okay, they're probably better off in jail. But what I'm saying is that, yeah, they killed that guy, the pedophile, but you have this whole network that's continuing to enhance the crime.
We get that bit. Victor,
I agree that.
You frozen? Victor? Okay. Matilda, any last word?
See, I would say, Simon, see, Nelson, you're talking about a network. This network are run by people who actually move human beings, kids, out of their home, out of their environment, cross the border. So these are actually human beings. Fine, we should address the network, how they run these things. But it's no longer a psychological problem when someone or a group of people move kids for sexual exploitation, there's no excuse. That is straight off death penalty. Boom. End of. There's no need to love that person. From where? How do you want to love that kind of person?
Okay. Okay. Carla, do you want to finish up with one of your final conclusions, please, before we...
Well, I think in summary, I would say that whether you're pro or anti capital punishment and the reasons behind that, one of the things we do have to think about is the moral system that underpins the society, because that also has a massive role to play. And whether or not you're going to execute people, it does not remove the responsibility for you to make sure that society has all the structures in place to ensure that people are prevented from doing certain crimes in the first place, whether that's through moral instruction, education, parenting, religion, whatever system you're going to claim is going to be able to work as a deterrent. You have to make sure it's effective. And I think that that's more important than the actual death penalty itself. But also I was thinking about, when I was listening to a couple of the comments, I was thinking about the old-fashioned system where societies were much smaller and they used to exile people. And exile essentially was like a death penalty, but it was a death penalty where you didn't actually kill the person, but the fact of being rejected by society, by not having access to anything, not being able to be a part of the social structure and the community, essentially was signing a death warrant for that person. But it's become more complex for us to do that now. And I know Nelson touched on something there by naming and shaming pedophiles, for example. It's like a form of exile, isn't it? And I think that maybe in the future, we might see something like that, where people are somehow excluded from society and excluded from having access to anything, so that in essence, they're going to find themselves having some kind of death warrant, whether that's at the hands of other criminal entities or the people who are going to take on their own form of justice. We don't know, but it's a challenging one. Back to you, Simon.
Thanks. So this closing, I'm just going to reiterate a small sentence or paragraph. It says the death penalty is discriminatory. It is often used against the most vulnerable in the society, including poor, ethnic and religious minorities and people with mental disabilities. Some governments use it to silence their opponents. The study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science determined that at least 4% of people on death row were and are likely innocent. Gross has no doubt that some innocent people have also been executed. So in closing, that death penalty is something that we can't hand out lightly, and it's a good thing we don't make the laws because we'll be split down the middle. And that's just food for thought. Our disclaimer is, of course, we are not, we're just podcasters and are not experts. We are a group of podcasters sharing experiences and discussions, ideas. If you are struggling with any issues related to the topic covered in our episode, please reach out to a skilled professional. You can also check out our individual podcasts from the commentary and resources that may be useful. So starting with Howla, please remind everybody what your podcast is.
Women in Stories podcast. You can reach out to me on Spotify and all podcast platforms. Over to you.
Nelson?
You're muted.
We can't hear you, Nelson.
Nelson Jason Brano, the host of Investing in America. You can find me on Spotify, iTunes, and towards the end of this month on our YouTube channel. Thank you.
Matilda, thank you.
I'm host of Coffee with Matilda, A Journey to Self, and you can find me and on Spotify and all the platforms, also YouTube and Facebook.
Victor? Guys, please don't forget to
I'm the host of the Aspire Entrepreneurs podcast, the home of, you can find me on YouTube, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, and all your favorite platforms.
And Carla?
You can find the Wonder and Wellbeing podcast everywhere on the internet, Apple Podcasts and all major podcasting platforms. And I'd just like to thank the audience. Thank you to James and Mudiaga and the people that commented. We've got this final comment from James who says thousands of innocents are executed by war, which is worse. And also have a great night, folks. You have a great night too, James. Back to you, Simon.
And thank you from the team and myself. Simon Rushing of Africa Investor Stories and Taxis Chronicles can be found on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Apart from that, have a good night and don't start thinking about executing people.